You know, I'm very, very, very embarrassed for English racing today.
The severity of breaking the rules is horrendous.
Controversial new whip rules have dominated headlines in recent weeks, with Richard Hughes and Christophe Soumillon both high-profile victims of the new penalty structure. But are the new rules fundamentally wrong, or just something that will take time to bed in?
I think they are entirely workable, very beneficial, and it's been utterly insane to bring them in this week. Any fool could have told you you're going to have teething troubles. You do not need them running up to Champions Day. But from what I've seen so far, they're making jockeys ride much better. They're doing exactly what I hope they'd do. Jockeys are really doing everything else before they go to the whip. The whip, forget all this steering business. The whip, the most important thing a whip does is to make a horse try hard. And you want the horse to try very hard in the last furlong, and you can do that. And as for counting what people can count, and of course there'll be some teething troubles. But it is what I've seen so far, and I was at Cheltenham yesterday, watched the others on the telly, jockeys were using a lot more other things which they need to do, is what I've always taught my French and Nicholson, before you go to the whip. There are going to be issues and teething troubles. A horse that's very reluctant at the start, you have to give him a crack. Then he backs off the first two, you've got to hit him to jump the open ditch. You've used up your quota. But the basic effect, from my eyes as an ex-jockey a million years ago, has been very beneficial to the way horses are ridden. Forget about all the welfare. There was never a welfare issue, in my view. With this whip, you couldn't hurt a fly anyway. You had to squash a fly if it was in front of you, but it wouldn't hurt it in the middle. But it makes jockeys use their bodies more instead of just go straight to the whip. And that's good for balance, good for horses, and good for the image of the game, which is the point at the beginning.
Jockeys at Ascot on Saturday were advised not to talk to the press on the whip issue, but well placed to present their views on the matter is former Derby-winning jockey John Reid, who spoke to Lee Mottershead.
Well, John Reid, as a former weighing room star of many years standing, you must have been watching the last week's development on the issue. I guess with great sadness. How do you respond to what's happened this week?
Well, it's been a bit of a disaster, really, because, I was at one of the meetings a while back, and, they seemed to be sensible about the whole thing, and I thought they would come out with a pretty sensible outcome. And, I am aware that you've got the people out there that want to restrict the whip more and more. And, over the years, that's been well documented. And the whips now, let's face it, don't hurt a horse at all. So that's one issue that you very much need to bring forward, that these don't damage horses. And it's now about the visual side of it. And I realise that people watching television, especially the ones that don't watch much, need the visual side to look good. And the problem with this is they come in with a sledgehammer to crack a nut in a way, because, I understand dropping the amount of times a horse can be whipped. And but when they start talking about furlong poles and do this and do that, you're in the middle of a field at Newmarket with 30 runners. I've never seen the furlong pole, because you're in the middle of the field, you're concentrating on what you're doing, and you're getting your horse balanced and running. And when you pick the stick up, you pick it up when you're ready. You don't pick it up because you've passed the furlong pole. You might have to go before it or after it. So trying to get people to realise where they are, unless they're going to put a stripe across the track and have every horse jumping it. Most jockeys won't know where the furlong pole is. They quicken up at the 3 or going down between the 3 or 3.5 when the pace picks up. And big wide track, you've got no chance to know where the furlong pole is. So the penalties that's a silly rule for a start. And the severity of breaking the rules is horrendous. 5 days for one slop inside the furlong marker, well, that's just horrendous. Far too strong. And to take the prize money and riding fee off a jockey, let's say it happens today. It's going to cost a jockey over 10,000 quid. Now, is that fair? In my book, it's not fair.
But John, would you accept that in some of the biggest races, like the Grand National and like the Prince of Wales Estate this year, where Frank used to stick 24 times on rewilding, clearly flouting the existing rules, that the BHA had to do something to try and bring jockeys into line?
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. That is not acceptable, and when that happens, they should come down on it heavy. But, there's got to be a little bit of leeway, because, this is not exact and you know, it's hard to know exactly where you are in the race. Like I say, when you're surrounded in the middle of the track in Newmarket, there's not a chance to know. Jumping it might be different if they say over the last is a big obstacle and you're over it. I can sort of get that. But of course them horses are running slowly and they're a lot more tired. So it's a different issue, and I haven't ridden jumping, so I can't talk about that. I can only talk about the flat where I'm aware of what happens. But to take a prize money off, 5 days for a start for any jockey is quite a long time off. Especially in the middle of the season, you're missing a lot of meetings and potentially a lot of money. But to take the prize money away as well, it's just too much. It's just way out of proportion.
And John, there seems to be a consensus among the weighing room that whilst they agree with your point about the final furlong rule being difficult, but that they're happy to ride to a limit of 7 smacks in a race. How manageable is that, do you think, for jockeys, limiting themselves to that number of hits?
Oh yes, I think, listen, they'll get used to it. It's like dropping a speed limit. You'll break it for a little while until you get used to it, and that's okay, but it's not acceptable, this knowing where you are. So if you hit it once, 2 yards past the furlong pole, you get 5 days. 1 yard before, how are they going to tell? They don't have cameras on the furlong pole. The angle of the camera could actually get you 5 days. So that's ludicrous. They've got to change that. And the penalties, for me, they've got to change the penalties.
We've had hundreds of comments from Racing Post members on this issue, a number of which you can see scrolling along the bottom of the screen. We'll leave the last word, though, to our very own Alistair Down.
It's been a long and difficult week for racing, with the contentious whip rules being introduced, and frankly chaos has reigned. It's no real surprise. They're going to take some time to bed in, and for the jockeys flat and jumps to learn how they could behave within the limits of the new rules. But of course there's been huge contention. Richard Hughes handing in his licence at Kempton last Thursday, and that has really highlighted the situation because he's a man of intelligence and no small insight. The problem is that the jockeys, particularly on the flat, don't like this limit of 5 strokes in the final furlong out of a total number of strokes of 7. Well, without changing the thrust of the rules, without getting away from the fact that we need as a sport to limit use of the whip, there seems to me to be some leeway. Then let's get rid of this limit of 5 strokes in the final furlong on the flat and just say, right, you're limited to 7 strokes at any time during the race. I envisage less problem over jumps. The division, if you like, the cut-off point for use of the whip after landing over the final flight or the final fence is easier to interpret, and the jump swaying room are a more malleable bunch and they're more finely tuned to public opinion, I think, than some of the flat lads. The important thing is there was this ludicrous talk of a jockey's strike. That would be not professional suicide but the suicide of a profession. Just think how the public media, the wider media, would paint it. Jockeys going on strike for the right to hit a horse. It would look bonkers. Luckily the hotheads have not won the day. They're going to be talks on Monday between the Professional Jockeys Association and the BHA. The BHA can't back down. They mustn't lose their bottle, but they can tweak the rules enough to accommodate the jockeys and end this civil war, which is doing none of us any good whatsoever. The world has changed. The game is moving on. That's for the good of the future of the sport. Let's go with it, and let's take the jockeys with us.